On this edition of Prime Sports Tennis, our special guest is a former Wimbledon champion who reached 5 Grand Slam finals in total, carried his native Australia to 2 Davis Cup titles, ranked as high as number 4 in the world, and is now coaching the top 15 ranked American Coco Vandeweghe. Stay tuned as Prime Sports Tennis host and former top 15 player in the world, Andrea Leanne, goes one-on-one with Pat Cash as Prime Sports Tennis for this Tuesday, the 1st of May, 2018 on the Prime Sports Radio Network starts now.
Pat, thanks so much for joining us today. It's just such a treat to have you here. What an incredible week last week in Stuttgart with Coco. Just a great moment there to see her beat 3 top 10 players. But I think you're in Marbella now. First of all, we should say you're taking a little R&R with Coco before going to Madrid.
Yeah, that's right. We always had planned to have this week off. We just didn't really expect her to do so well in the tournament, I suppose. And so it's Madrid tournament starts early. It starts on the Saturday, which is usually the day the qualifying starts. But because it's such a big draw and such a big tournament, they started early. So just a couple of quiet days near the beach for her really, just to recover, because she hasn't really had much of a break, because she went right through the Fed Cup week, of course, the week before. In France, so it's been a pretty intense couple of weeks for her.
Yeah, she mentioned in her press the journey the last few weeks, a lot of soul searching, it seemed like. And when we go to that, of course, we mentioned she beat the number 1 player in the world, Simona Halep, won 12 consecutive games against Sloane Stephens, beat Garcia. And then, of course, the tough final against Pliskova. But I think everyone remembers that last moment where the cameras panned to her having climbed into the stands and, the raw emotion there of obviously maybe a little disappointment, but maybe a little relief as she sobbed into your shoulders.
Yes, it was, as I said, it was a big couple of weeks for her. And we really sort of, I think, look, I can say it's just sort of, it was pretty emotional. And I put it on her to really break through here and to be able to play an intensive sort of tennis that I don't know if she really has done an awful lot of as far as focus goes. And she had a great run at the US Open, we know that, and she played some great tennis. And of course, you have a day off in between most of those matches unless there's a rain delay, sort of recover. And we just sort of went into the tournament and said, look, how, this is how you play on clay. You know how to play on. You know how to hit the ball. It's a purely physically you're fine. You can run all day. We know that you're strong. This is a mental battle. It's really, really tough on you. It's going to be tough. So, why don't we just try and compete with Sloane? Just try and do your best and see how you go. And she played great tennis. Sloane didn't play particularly well, but Coco didn't give her a chance, and we walked away from that going, wow, okay, well, let's see if you can do it again. And she continued to do it the whole way through the tournament. And, really probably the only worst 2 games she played in the whole tournament were probably in the second set there, where she served a couple of double faults to go down a double break and then, fought her way back to almost get back into the match at the end of the match. So I think at the end, she was just exhausted. She just really was mentally exhausted. She didn't think she had the capacity to do it, and I think she was pretty proud and exhausted to show that she could, and she showed me she could. And I think that's what a coach and a pupil relationship is about. Really, you want to do well for your coach, and I want to do well for my pupil. And it was a great week last week.
And then building from that, because perhaps this may be a turning point for her, coming into this. She struggled with, obviously, the flu in Australia and then, some results that she wasn't thrilled about. But when you look at this as far as a mental and a physical, because you brought so much to your career, you brought in all the physical and the fitness and the martial arts aspect of trying to be flexible and fast and strong. And then, of course, as you just said, the mental battle of having to compete every single point. Is it more of a challenge in today's game, mentally or physically?
Gee, it's well, the men, I think, is almost more mentally. I've always said that tennis is 60% mental, But physically, the guys can go on, and they have to. And they're so tough, and it's really who can break the other person down. I mean, Djokovic is a classic example, where a guy his mental powers were phenomenal. He's lost them, and he can barely win a match. I mean, how does that happen? It's because it's just you've got to be mentally focused and mentally toughened up, and that's a huge part of the game. I mean, for me, it was about being the best player I could possibly be. I said to Coco, I said, listen, you've had a rough week last week at the Fed Cup, and you lost a match when you had a good lead, and you got then Kathy picked Maddie Keys over you to finish it up. But I said, look, there's one thing I know how to do, is I know how to compete, and if you just follow my lead, I'll show you how you can do that. And she did, and it is exhausting. And I don't know if you saw some of the matches, but I said to her at the change of hands, I said, this is not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. You're exhausted, and it's just really, really tough to keep your focus, but you're doing a great job at it. And this is how you play tennis, and every single point is important. Every single point. And I've emphasized this all the time, and I think it really does, after sort of 9 months or so, the penny just dropped. It's like, wow, yeah, I have to play every single point if I'm going to beat these players. And one double fault somewhere, it might seem like it's nothing at 30 love or 15 all. You think, oh, that's okay. No, it's not good enough. And that's what happened in the final. She said a double fault at, I think, 30 love. She lost the game. She gets handed the opponent, one of the top players in the world, a point, and she ended up losing the game. And that was purely because of the double fault, So, it's a brutal game out there. It is, but no doubt, it's the toughest sport in the world. And, if you want to be competitive at it, you've got to try and get the most out of yourself.
Well, do you sense absolutely, I mean, you sense from her now that this could be a turning point, that, and the days after now, she realizes now I need to see what I do to have that mental consistency, to have the consistent results, because we've seen a lot of the players, have great results and then go up and down a lot, including in Stuttgart, where we had a number of, the top players. But now Coco emerging perhaps maybe as one of the most mentally strongest of them all.
Well, let's see. It's 1 week. I know she can do it. It's very hard to do it week in, week out. The WTA tour, the women's tour, is so very, very even with a whole lot of talented players, and those talented players can run hot, and there's very little you can do to stop them. And Coco's one of those players. I mean, you could say, there's loads of them. Osaka's come through. She's come from nowhere, but. Pliskova can, when she runs hot, how are you going to stop her? You really can't. And of course, talking about the Williams sisters and the Keys and Stevens, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, it goes down to 20 in the world. Gerges, when she runs hot, how are you going to stop her? She's really, really good. It really does go down to 20, 30 in the world. And so if you have a bit of an off day, you're going to get beaten. And that's why the results sort of tend to go a little bit up and down. It's just so even that it tends to, you run hot or somebody runs cold, and that's a good week or it's a bad week, and it can have a bit of a roll-on effect as well. So, I think, as I said, the goal last week was to start to build mental endurance, and at least have an idea what she's supposed to do, and then try and do it every. Let's start with one set of really good tennis, with no mistakes, no unforced errors. Et cetera. And then let's build up from that. And she did, she played about 10 great sets in a row. So, the next step would be to see if we can do it the next week. See if we can do it. It's a different opponent, different conditions, different bounce, slight altitude in Madrid this time. It's dry courts. It's different. So, and that's the challenge. The week after will be Rome. So that'll be another challenge. And so it's a never-ending challenge, and it's I don't expect her to do well every week, but I think she's certainly one of the things that I tend to scratch my head a little bit at. I know she wasn't 100% fit from that flu virus and everything. She had bad virus she had in Australia, but Indian Wells and Miami were poor results. I thought she could do. Always thought she should be able to consistently be in the semi-finals, quarterfinals every week. There's no reason for her to lose first round 2 or 3 weeks in a row and then come back. But it's not that easy it's all right in theory. It's not that easy to do in reality.
Right, and you said there's a lot of depth out there. You know, when you look back, as you played in the 80s and 90s, what do you think is the biggest difference in the tours today and the demands on the players today from when you played?
Well, I think it's you can't afford to have a bad day. There's no doubt about it. The depth is better. We used to get the odd first round pretty easy, to be perfectly honest. If you're a seeded player, I think particularly. For the men, I think it's a bit of a war of attrition because there's very few different styles can work in tennis. I mean, you can be a bit more attacking on the grass. You have to be a bit more defensive on the clay, but basically everybody plays the same, and that's the only disappointing thing about the tennis circuit. Everybody hits the same shots. Everybody plays the same tactics. Everybody does the same thing. So what separates the best from the good from the best, other than Federer? Somebody like Federer plays differently. Del Potro's got a massive forehand. He's got the few players that got a few little bits extra, but by and large, you've got to be mentally and physically ready every single match to be willing to go out there and play 3.5 hours to win a match, and that's a tough grind. It really, really is tough, and you got to be. It's one thing just doing the match, but it's the training behind it. So the recovery, the recovery work. The fitness work, it's more about recovery. I think we had some super fit players. I mean, there's nobody fitter ever than Bjorn Borg, for instance, or Stefan Edberg. But the ability for these players to recover, they go and get ice baths, they have a trainer with them, they get stretched, they get massages, they do all the stuff that this wasn't available in our era. So players broke down and got injured and just weren't able to back it up week after week, and they can do it nowadays. I'm a bit jealous when I see these players getting massaged and stretched out and jumping into ice baths, and I go, as I'm aching, my body's aching from all these injuries that I've had. I sort of say, I wish I had that back in my day.
Yeah, they do. They have these teams. It's the entourages. But it seems like you really, I mean, you've been enough for Coco in turning her whole mentality around in the training. And also, I look into all the channels that you exhausted to be the best player. And as you talked about, it was the diet, you're gluten-free. I think you were before your time. We hear about Novak gluten-free, but actually you were probably before your time and realizing what the best things were as far as training. When you look at Novak trying to exhaust all the things, and you mentioned the mental and the physical, what would you tell someone like Novak? I mean, where do you think he needs to go? Because it seems like he still is struggling. He has exhausted. He's tried to do all the different training techniques, but it still has been tough.
Yeah, look, it's really hard to know. I mean, I don't sort of know the ins and outs of his team. I remember doing quite a lot of meditation for a while back in my career, and I talked to Martina Navratilova about it, and because she was doing some, and I said, "Well, how did you feel?" And she said, "I lost my killer instinct from doing it." Now, I don't necessarily prescribe to that, but that was a really interesting point. And she I kind of felt I was happy, relaxed, even if I lost, and I needed to have some anger in me to be able to play, and I certainly played like that as well, and I'm not saying everybody's a different personality, but it would be interesting to see that. I mean, some people are prescribing that, he's just a little bit too happy with his life, but he's too peaceful or whatever. I don't think that's a bad thing. Believe me, I don't think it's a bad thing. But to have a little bit of killer instinct, I think goes a long way. It has to in an individual sport, and I think you probably get that. I mean, I lost it completely for a year or so. I didn't want to play tennis. I couldn't play tennis anymore. I got injured. I didn't care, and I was out for about 18 months with injuries. But then, sitting there watching the other players winning, and I started getting it back again. I said, "Oh, you know what? I'm ready to go out there and really tear it up." But it took me a year. It took me 18 months off and injured, off and on. Physically, I never really came back to it, but I certainly had the passion to go out there and do the work. And sometimes you just need a break. And I think Novak sort of had that break, and I think he probably come back with a bit of passion and a bit of desire to do some unfinished business. And he's certainly a good enough player to do that. And I don't think and he's not assuming his arm is okay. I think that's the number one priority, of course.
Right. When you talk about killer instinct and, of course, that passion, and we're looking at all the players trying to play Rafa out there, Team and Sasha Zverev and Karina Busta, and they're all having trouble even making a dent in Rafa. And some people are saying, is it more mental? Are they intimidated? Is it physical? They don't want to put in the 5 million hours of work it's going to take to beat the guy. What's your take on that? Because, of course, everyone's waving the white flag that no one can beat Rafa, but I'm also the feeling that there has to be someone in there if they can combine that. Is it more mental or physical now in approaching him?
Gee, it's everything. I mean, if there's a tougher task in sport, I suppose, in any sport, is to beat Rafa Nadal on clay. I think somebody said that once, and I thought that's a bit ridiculous. And I thought about it and went, you know what? I think it's just about right. It's just about the toughest thing in sport to do is to beat Rafa Nadal on clay. I mean, really, when you think about it, Roger Federer at Wimbledon would at the moment become pretty close as well, but he's just ruthless. He just really is ruthless, and to watch him practice is breathtaking. I mean, I just love watching Rafa practice. Watching Federer practice is almost exact opposite. Not that I don't like it, but he's just so relaxed, and he plays for 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and goes, yeah, that's good enough. And he's so relaxed, and he can go on the walk on the match court and play well. Where Rafa, he just belts the ball until the poor ball is screaming. It's got nothing on it for an hour and a half before he goes on and plays a match. I mean, just ruthless. So how does this guy possibly keep it up? I mean, he's just a freak. He's a freak. You get these freaks. Federer is a freak. Borg's a freak. They just keep going. There's certain people that are just freak athletes, and Rafa is just one of them. He's going to get injured. He's just it's almost like he's a Ferrari. He's a Ferrari that you can hear coming around the corner in the Formula One. You know what it's a Ferrari, and here it comes, but it's going to break down from time to time. It's got to go back in the workshop. Where Federer is the electric car. He's just, what was that? What was that? It zipped around the corner. I didn't see a flash of something. I didn't hear it. That's sort of Roger Federer, isn't it? He just zimps past and he'll probably keep going forever.
Well, since Rafa, obviously, as you said, he's just unbelievable on the clay. I guess on the faster surfaces, these guys with the bigger weapons can get some easier points and more confidence. But if you were coaching like a team, and Sasha Zverev, do they need to develop, more dimension to their game? Get the volleying in, being able to take advantage of the big groundies, get a more powerful serve. Learn how to get a little bit more versatility to jerk him around. Is there anything that you think they can do going into the French? And wearing him down also would help if one of them could take a dent in him in the first few rounds.
Yeah, look, you're right. That's the first couple of rounds are probably where you can get him. And most, a lot of champions are like that. They're just a little bit susceptible early on, or if they get, in a long match. But look, Team's got a very good serve. He can win a lot of points on his serve. So does Zverev. I think Zverev is still learning. He's still pretty young. I saw some, pretty fundamental errors in Miami against Isner in the final, which is, that's still a learning thing. A couple of passing shots, Isner was dead, just sitting at the net, and they missed a couple of passing shots on a break point, I think, or something. And champions don't miss those, and he will be a very good player. I think his forehand's got to improve a little bit. Team's backhand is phenomenal. It's whether it's been able to do that over 5 sets, and that's the tough thing. And look, it certainly helps to have added dimension, a little bit extra, to have some slice shots and some drop shots and various things like that. But it really is a tough ask. I think your Rafa's got to have a bad day or be sick or injured or something for one of these guys to get through, and they have to play out of their mind. But coming through, these guys do have to develop their game more. There's no doubt that Team he plays way back at the back of the court and take a big swings for his backhand. Zverev does the same thing. That's not going to beat you. That's not going to beat Rafa most of the time. Rafa does play a long way back. On the clay, it's going to work. Federer is going to beat him. And I've said this, and I get hate emails all the time from Rafa fans or whatever. And I said at the back of the US Open, I said, I still have Federer favourite for the Australian Open because he just, if he's up, you cannot beat Roger Federer returning from 12 feet behind the baseline and expect to win. You just can't. And, that's just proven to be the case. time and again, Federer's got him, and will do other than on clay. But nobody else plays that way. I mean, Federer plays exact opposite. So, and he's, as I said, he's just one out of the box. But these guys have to learn to come up to play on the baseline. How else are you going to beat these guys? And and they have to be willing to take a step backwards in their career to go 2 steps forward. And a lot of these players don't like doing that. They really don't. And it's, I understand that with Coco. And I say, that was one of the things we always joked about. He said, I want you to, 1 step back, we're going to take 2 steps forward. And she said, you sure you haven't got it around the wrong way? So we always used to joke about that when things weren't going well. I said, no, we've got to keep improving. And you have to keep improving on the tour, which is really tricky to do because you don't have time off. So these guys, where are they going to develop their net game? Where are they going to develop starting to play on the baseline? Well, they're not. The only time to do it is like 1 month at the end of the year. They have to do it during the tour. So they're going to have some bad results while they improve, if they want to improve, if they want to be the best. And so, I just don't see these guys really challenging, a guy like Federer for a little while, and assuming that he's fit, or Rafa for that matter. I don't see them really challenging him for another couple of years, and that's probably due to age more than anything else.
So we're going to see Rafa standing to receive serve, almost in the front row seats there. These guys aren't going to hit those little slice dinks to keep him honest. But it's so interesting to see. As you said, they're trying to continue to strong-arm him down the middle of the court and not really, as you said, thinking of other ways like Roger does. And, of course, you, though, when you played, you were so fast. You had the big serve. You had the fitness. You had the mental. Of course, the black and white checkered headband, it was such an intimidating front. Is it, when you look as a coach now, is it a lot different perspective as a coach than from when you played?
Yeah, I mean, of course it is. I mean, it's certainly challenging. I put it that way. I think it's really challenging. But I look at the same thing. Well, one of the best and the worst things that happened in my career was my injuries. I got a lot of injuries, as you know. I went really hard, maybe too hard on the training. I got a lot of injuries, and towards the end of my career, I had to really rebuild my career. I wasn't quite as quick as I used to be. Rebuild my technique. So I went back to the drawing board, and I caught up with a guy called Brad Langavad, who's an Australian guy. He was on the tour, lower level tour. And he went back to college, and he went back to university, became a biomechanist, a specialist in body movement, and he specializes in tennis. And I hurt my back. Somebody said, have you heard of Brad Langavad? And I said, oh, no, I didn't really know about him. He said, okay, well, you need to change your technique on your serve. So I went to Brad. I changed my technique on my serve, and I said, thank you very much. That was great. But he planted something in my head. He said, listen, you need to fix your forehand and your backhand, and even your best shots, your backhand volley can get better. And I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? And I realized he was actually right. He was right. And it took me basically getting beaten by younger, fitter guys to go back to the drawing board. And I changed my technique completely. And so it opened my eyes to how technique has changed over the years. So I've had to Coco had been taught to play old school, side-on stances, various things like that. And it just doesn't cut it. And so she had to do some phenomenal things, and she's had to trust me, and I had to trust my instinct as well to say, listen, you can't be playing side-on forehands in this modern game. We have to develop open stance forehands. Not to say that occasionally you don't hit a closed stance. And the same on the backhand. You've got to hit the open stance. Look at the Williams sisters. Look how quick they are around the court. Yes, they are great athletes, but they're also hitting the ball and they're back into position because of the way their technique is. And she took that on board, and the improvement in her movement and everything else has been phenomenal. But that took a lot of guts to do, for her to do, and for me to do as well. But it's kind of easier for me to come in cold and say, listen, you need to fix A, B, and C. But again, how do you fix A, B, and C when you're in the middle of running around the tennis circuit? So it was just little bit by little bit. So it's a real challenge to be able to work with a player mentally, to not to flatten them, to say, your backhand's no good. They go and they say, why did you just destroy my backhand? My confidence is gone now. Why did you say that? And that's what they'll come back and they'll say that, and it's true. So you have to be very careful not to destroy that. And I think it's even more sensitive on the WTA tour than is a guy. I mean, I think guys can front up to a guy and go, listen, that was you're an idiot on the court, blah blah blah. You didn't perform. That's the way it goes. If I said that to Coco, she'd probably walk away and not talk to me for a month, and I'd find a letter saying, "Excuse me, you've been fired. You can't talk to me that way." So it's everybody's different. So you have to learn how to talk to your player and what things work and what things don't. And that's as big a challenge as anything in tennis.
And, of course, one of the most sensitive moments of talking to the players is on-court coaching. And I've seen Coco call you out. I have to tell you, I give you so much credit, Pat. I saw at the Canadian Open last year where she obviously just got into the finals in Stanford the week before. Big week, was tired. And it wasn't her day against Radwanska. And you were so great. You just had such great perspective and balance and taking the pressure off her. And then, of course, as you mentioned in Stuttgart against Garcia, having to go on and really pushing her a little bit to break through that and realizing it's not always fun. What's your feeling on the on-court coaching? Because, Chris Clary today at the Times just ran a poll as to, people like it or not like it, and the majority feel that they're purists and feel that the tennis players should think on their own. But clearly you've been an enormous help with Coco.
Well, I don't really like it, I got to be honest. And I'm one of the purists, I think. I think tennis is an individual sport. But I do think it kind of adds to the TV and the audience. The TV particularly, obviously the audience at the tennis don't know what we're saying. So look, that's one of those things. Are we entertainment or are we a sport? And I suppose we're both. And we got to accept the fact that we may have to change things to attract attention, to attract sponsors, to attract TV. And if that's one of the things, I find it quite interesting because when I see a coach, if I'm watching the TV at the tournament or just at home or wherever, hotel, and a coach goes up to talk to his player, I immediately go on, turn the volume on, and want to hear what they have to say because I want to know what they're saying so I can learn about the opponent. So I'm looking at it a different way, but I find it quite fascinating. But a lot of the time when your players called you out, they're in a bit of a desperate situation. They haven't got things under control, and then what do you say? Sometimes it's an obvious thing. Hey, listen, you've just got to keep hitting to a backhand or whatever it happens to be. You're going too much. But sometimes they're just flustered. And that's most of the time the players are flustered. The coach talks and the players sort of shaking their head and arguing back or don't know what they're saying. They're sort of flustered, and a lot of the time is to calm them down. And in some cases, just, hey, listen, it's only a tennis match. Relax, go out there, enjoy yourself, swing away. But most of the time, occasionally you make a difference. But I'd say most of the time you really don't make a difference. It's down to the player and the opponents are having a good run. So it's a tricky one.
Well, Wimbledon agrees with you. I think they just voted down today on, the side court coaching. They do not want to see that. They are purists as well, and so I guess that will not be seen in the Grand Slam.
Well, I think the Grand Slam, there's no way the Grand Slam. The U.S. Open should never have coaching. That's ridiculous. Absolutely beyond ridiculous. I'm 110% against that. Coaching during qualifying and coaching on the side of the court, it's just ridiculous. We're talking about Grand Slams here. It's the biggest thing in tennis, and that should be an individual sport, one-on-one. So, yeah, am I just old-fashioned, man? Am I just old-fashioned? I think maybe I am, Andrea.
No, I agree. And to call you old-fashioned, it's funny because I was going through, you really, again, I remember the iconic moment of you climbing into the stands after winning Wimbledon. And, of course, that set the precedent for so many to embrace your team and so forth. And you've brought so much, you made tennis cool for so many generations of kids. And I remember the Versace leather pants and the metal studs and all that. And you just made it so cool, for kids. Well, I don't know if Coco knows about that. Does she know about those?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about me. It's funny. Every she keeps coming and saying, "Oh, I didn't know that," and "I didn't know that." And it was funny. We were having an interview during Wimbledon and. With maybe Tennis Channel or NBC, whatever it was, and they flashed up me climbing to the stand. She looked at me and she goes, "Were you the first one who did that?" I was like, "Yeah, I thought that was the first thing you knew about me. You probably didn't know anything about my tennis." She had no idea. So, well, maybe I was cool one time.
I think she's taking your lead.
I really appreciate.
Yeah, no, I do, because I think she took your lead, because when she climbed in the stands in Stuttgart, even though it was a completely different moment, you could see that maybe those imprints are making a difference with her, and you are getting a lot of progress there. But I know you're on your way to Madrid, and you're also father of 4, grandfather of 5, right?
Grandfather of 3. Yep.
Three. Okay. And I've been on your website. It's an incredible website. It's constant. It's all the updated things of fitness and nutrition and training and having that mental and physical. And I wondered if you see any player today that looks a lot, that reminds you of yourself.
Gee, I think I find a lot of the guys do. They really work. Andy Murray for me was the one. He's a guy who's had some injuries, and he's really turned over every opportunity, tried every single thing to be the best that he can be. And I have tremendous respect for that guy. He's now trying to come back from his hip surgeries. And he's in many ways he's mirrored exactly what's happened to me. I had a bad back in his career, then he had something else, and then he's got his hips, and I had broken Achilles. And he's just super determined to do and he's kind of a bit angry as well, and so I think Murray, and he relies very much on his physical ability, to be able to chase balls down and get everything back, and mentally, tough, and that was, kind of like I was, but I think he's probably got more talent technically. He probably grew up with a better technique than I did. I was sort of halfway old school and halfway new school, and it didn't quite always go together, but it's a lot of the players are out there trying to be the best they can be, and they have, they really do go to the nth degree to try and be better, and I have a lot of respect for that.
Well, I can tell you that everyone has a lot of respect for you, because especially on the women's tour, because you obviously are really setting the bar higher. You're having great practice with Coco and trying to make her set that bar higher, and that she can really push through it. So to have someone of your stature out there coaching has been a real treat to watch for me as well. I have to tell you, whenever I see you going on court, I put the volume up, because I always want to know what you're going to say. But I appreciate it, and I know that. So you have Madrid, and then Rome, and then the French, and but things seem to be looking up then for Coco going into even on clay.
Yeah, well, she can play on clay. I mean, if you had to write down what's a perfect clay quarter, you go, well, big forehand, big backhand, and then, well, what's an extra added thing? Well, a big serve with a kick serve, maybe, and that would win you a lot of points. And I said, well, that's Coco, and obviously a mental capacity is a huge thing on clay, and we're adding to that. And I always say to her, when something goes wrong, I say, don't worry, I've got a plan. And I do, because the plan is to get better and to keep improving on things. And so, and she's she's trying that. It doesn't always work, but she's trying, and that's. I mean, what more can you do at the end of your career? And we had to have a couple of heart-to-heart conversations, and I said, look, you just want to end your career and go, you know what, I gave it a really good shot. Sometimes you just don't have the talent, or sometimes you weren't taught the technique, or sometimes you got injured, or sometimes you didn't have the money, whatever it happens to be. Sometimes you just can't be the best, but give it a shot anyway, and let's give it a shot, see how good you can possibly be, and that's, I think it's resonated with her. And I said, you don't want to walk away having a lot of regrets. I mean, everybody can have regrets in their career, of course, a little bit, go, oh, I should have played this tournament, I should have done that. Of course, hindsight's 20/20, isn't it? In hindsight, you know everything, but just be as best as you can possibly do. Give it a great shot for a couple of years and see how you go. Once the fire's gone, then you can walk away saying, I gave it a shot. I had a good career. Yeah, maybe I won a Grand Slam, maybe I didn't, but I've had a great career. Anybody can have a career out of tennis and make a living out of tennis. I'll tell you what, they're a heck of a tennis player, and she's a heck of a tennis player. And there's a lot, but the problem is there's a lot of them else out there.
Well, I'll tell you, she's fortunate to have you as a coach, Pat, because the words you just said, so inspiring, and I think actually words that a lot of the players today could benefit from, because even the guys and the girls, trying to be your best, and I'm sure they're going to be listening because I'm glad to see Coco benefiting from it, and I give her a lot of credit too because, as you said, you have to have trust in your coach and really believe in your coach to try all these things. Especially this stage, she's just 20. She's 26 years of age, but probably could peak, late, a couple years if she keeps going.
That's a possibility. I think it's look, everybody's different. I mean, there's some players out there who are still, doing great tennis, and at 30, 31, they're playing their best tennis. I think Coco's a girl that, she likes tennis. Does she live it and breathe it? No. So I think she'll probably fall in and out of love with tennis a little bit. But, while she's loving it and while she's got the challenge, let's try and make the most out of it and see what happens.
Well, I appreciate it, and I will be cheering for the two of you on as you go to Madrid.
Thank you.
I tell you, I get a big kick. I saw you at the tiebreak 10 in New York, and you even have, the New York elite running up to you, giving you their business cards. I mean, you just attract fans from both sides, the kids and the adults. And so it's been a huge thing to see you back contributing as a coach because you were such an incredible player. And we give you all the good luck next week, and thank you so much for coming on. This has been incredible.
Thanks, anytime. Thanks, and good luck. Thanks for the support.
All right, well, thank you again, Pam. We'll touch base at the French. Thanks again.
All right, see ya.
Bye-bye. Well, Greg, that was quite some wise words from Pat Cash.
Yeah, you've done a lot of interviews. This has to rate right up there. Towards the top.
I mean, I'll tell you, I was just listening. I was inspired listening to him. And I played during his time, so I remember him climbing the stands at Wimbledon when he won Wimbledon. It was such a huge thing. It was a little bit of an upset, and he climbed the stand, and I tell you, it just added such incredible emotion, and you just had to cheer for him. And he brought so much to the game that wasn't there. He a little bit of a rebel, and of course the kids loved it. We loved it because, he went against the grain a little bit. But now you see all that went behind it and all the work he did and the research. And I always find that from, former world champions. They had that intellectual curiosity, and they're always pushing the boundary to want to be better, to want to improve, and not to leave any stone unturned. As even Coco said, and Pat does not leave any stone unturned in any way as a player and as a coach. So, a lot to be learned, and a lot that he said today that I really take a lot from, and it's been terrific to be able to talk to him.
Do you have a favorite Pat Cash match that you remember? I mean, as a fan of tennis growing up, there's matches I always remember from my favorite players, so they stick out. Or even sometimes not even my favorite players, just great tennis matches. Do you remember any specific tennis match when you were going through the circuit with at the time and before and after watching Pat play that sticks out?
Well, I can tell you in the locker room, we always watch Pat Cash because he had, of course, had the flair and the personality and as he said, the passion and that little bit of edge to him that made him such an exciting player to watch. But he also had the talent and the ability, the speed. I remember I've never seen someone so fast around the court and able to exploit the opponent so well. And obviously, he did a lot of homework going into this, which you didn't know at the time, but now we're, of course, hearing about it now. His site, patcash.co.uk, you can get it all there. I was reading all the homework he does do to be the best type of player he can be, and now as a coach. And it's really the players really were excited to watch him, and I think so were the fans. That's why he got to 5 Grand Slam finals, and he got to the semifinals of Wimbledon and the U.S. Open before he won Wimbledon. So he had a long career as #1 junior in the world. I think he was only one of 2 people to win the junior Wimbledon and the junior U.S. Open. So he has had quite a stellar, long career of consistency as well. Of course, he did mention all the injuries, and they didn't have the entourages in those days, but he was someone who I think was a pioneer of really exploring all that. And I remember he worked with lots of different people. He mentioned a few as to how to become a better athlete, to how to better prepare your body mentally and physically. So it's interesting now because we've heard so much from players like Martina Navratilova and Yvonne Lendl who tried to do different things, but really Pat, I think, was ahead of his time in what we're seeing now from the generation now with the Novaks and the Rogers and so forth, trying to really improve themselves. But he was one of the favorites. And of course, my generation, I think I'm a year older than he is, but all the girls in my generation absolutely adored him because he was a traditionalist. He respected the traditions, but he also was one of those players that was able to buck the trend if he felt that it was helpful.
And do you think that Coco has got what it takes if the two of them, like he was saying, how he kind of felt that maybe at times that she's getting it? Do you think that, what he's trying to, get to her, do you think that if they get that moment where for 6 months or a year where they just seem to be on the same page together, what kind of heights do you think Coco could take? Do you think she necessarily is the type of player that could be number one, or just the type of player that can go out, maybe she wins a Grand Slam event and maybe she gets the top 5 in the world, which is just fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a career like that.
Well, she beat the number one player in the world, so we know she has the talent and the ability. And, of course, I think this could be a turning point last week in Stuttgart where she obviously understood the mentality you need, the consistency and mentality, as Pat called it, the mental endurance you need, point in, point out, match in, match out, week in, week out. And I think that really was impressed upon her. And I give her a lot of credit, Greg, because you know what? It's not easy. When you're 26 and you've been doing things a certain way to bring in a coach who has obviously such incredible stature, you have to really try and want to work and improve and try some new things. And I give her enormous credit for doing this and pushing through it because it's not easy and it's not always fun. A lot of players, you see that they just want the fun part. They want to, win easy. And if it's not easy, they wave the white flag and walk off with some sort of injury. But that wasn't Coco last week, and she could have done that. It was clay, not her favorite surface. She had all the excuses if she wanted to pull them out, but she did not use them. She really went in there. She got tough. She got gritty. And that's the type of mentality that could really move her up the ranks. And quite frankly, yeah, absolutely could win Grand Slams. Absolutely could be top 5. And then you never know. As Pat said, there's such depth that at any one point in time, any player could be number one right now. And you have the return of Serena and Vika, obviously, but which adds to the mix. But no, I really have great hope for Coco. I think I'm very inspired by what she did last week, and I hope she's inspired because now the idea is to play on that and keep the momentum going and the improvement going.
All right, so coming up the rest of this month on Prime Sports Tennis, next week's Madrid, then Rome. So those are both 1,000 series events. And then at the end of the month, we have Roland Garros. And you're going to Paris.
Right, we're going to have our preview coming up. Madrid's a big one next week. As Pat said, they start Saturday, then the Italian, and, of course, we go into the French Open. So, yeah, I mean, look, everyone's trying to figure out how to beat Rafa. And as he mentioned, a lot of these guys can learn a lot from listening to Pat Cash. There's no question about it. They've got to use some creativity. They've got to use, a lot more ingenuity and so forth in trying to beat him. And they're just trying to arm wrestle him down the middle and not showing a lot of creativity in that strategy. And it's so interesting, Greg, because you hear a lot of the pundits, even some retired players, waving the white flag saying, hey, this is just going to be too tough. It's going to be, whitewash for Rafa. But no, I disagree. I think it's our job, Greg, in the next 2 weeks to come up with a game plan for these guys to beat Rafa, just if nothing else for the interest of entertainment in trying to say that no one's unbeatable. So it'll be interesting if they can. But I look forward to the next few events going up into the clay court Grand Slam.
All right, Andrea. Thanks a lot for doing the interview here on Prime Sports Network on Prime Sports Tennis. And also thanks to Pat Cash for joining us. And you'll be on with Jeff in the next week or two. We look forward to hearing back from you.
Great. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
All right. That's Andrea Leand, and that's going to do it for Prime Sports Tennis for this Tuesday, the 1st of May, 2018. We'll see you again real soon. And don't forget to check back with us for all our other sports programs. We have more NFL shows this week, golf coming up later today if you're listening on this Tuesday. And don't forget the Kentucky Derby on Saturday. We'll be covering that as well on Friday. So more tennis talk, though, coming up soon on Prime Sports Tennis on the Prime Sports Radio Network with Andrea Leand.